At the end of your life, what will be your legacy? What will you leave behind for future generations? For the world, join the World Messenger, Izabela Lundberg, each week as she brings you a new distinguished guest from the business, sports, or entertainment world to share their success, their struggles, and their lessons. They will share their insights into current hot topics that affect everyone. Izabela facilitates an intimate, vulnerable environment to find the true value of humanity and real leadership. Are you ready for your legacy? The legacy that matters?
Hello, my beautiful friends. It's Izabela Lundberg, the World Messenger, and I'm inviting you for another epic episode of Legacy Leader Show. And today I have a great guest, someone that I had a chance to hear not only to speak, but share passionately about the same things that all of us are here on the Legacy Leader Show to learn more from phenomenal thought leaders around the world and to figure out ways to be better leader and also to achieve our phenomenal legacy. He is joining us from Northern Italy. I am extremely jealous and probably indulge in great coffee, cappuccino, and some tiramisu. But without further ado, I wanted to introduce you to my great friend, Andrea Petrone, who is not only a phenomenal leader himself, but also focusing on high performance culture, as well as high standards of leadership. And he's doing similar work that I do, and I cannot wait for him to share what he's seen, what is happening on a global scale, and specifically in Europe around executive leadership, organizations, and the performance. Without further ado, Andrea, welcome.
Thank you so much, Izabela. It's such a big pleasure actually to be part of your show. Looking forward to this conversation. And thank you for your warm introduction, of course.
You're welcome, and I'm super glad that with all of these crazy times that we're living in, even though we cannot see each other in person, we can travel the world just in snippet and get information firsthand. So it's absolute pleasure to have you join us from Northern Italy. So do you mind sharing a little bit how is right now in Northern Italy? I know you guys had a really rough time and rough go last year. My heart was breaking as being diehard Croatian and that grew up with Italians and very similar cultures. I was really, really heartbroken, and I never thought I would have a chance to travel and see Italy again because everything looks so dramatic and gloomy last year.
Look, Izabela, it's been really tough, and I mean, I don't live in Italy all of the 12 months during the year, but I normally spend the summertime here. So I'm based in London, but of course, my heart and my parents are here, friends are still here. So as you can imagine, I used to get terrible messages and stories until actually a few months ago. So now the situation is much better. COVID from a COVID standpoint, although this new variant is in the UK. So I left the UK with the numbers were actually ramping up again.
Wow.
And now they're in a slight increase as well here in Italy. And I think from a pure leadership perspective, what that means is, unfortunately, it forced decision makers, leaders to postpone some of the initiatives or the decision that we're actually thinking to start actually just after the summer. Because it's been, as you know, Izabela, I think what happened here is that the leaders have been postponing decisions, say, you know what, let's wait until the summer. Let's wait until the numbers go down. Let's wait until, let's wait until was a common theme, isn't it? Yeah. And now that we were so close to get, hey, probably it's over. We did the vaccine. We are very close to end this vaccination campaign. We finally go back to business. And the reality is not really that, and not at least here in Europe. UK is very different, so I can tell you about the UK if you want to. But let's say I think the whole conversation right now is about that.
Thank you so much for giving us a little bit a snippet of that. I'm glad you're safe and sound with your family and enjoying gorgeous weather in Northern Italy. But if you don't mind, yes, we'd love to hear perspective what's going on in Europe and specifically UK, because UK was also heavily hit as well and disrupted so much for so long. So question it is how long we can endure all of this, right? And what are alternatives?
Well, I tell you this, which is, I think, something very interesting. I've been living in the UK since 2013, so it's now 8 years. And I've been all over the world for 20 years, my corporate world before. And then when I started my own business 3 years ago, when I was in the UK, it's been very interesting to notice how things change during this time. So essentially, I started business 1 year before COVID. And I tell you this is the economy in the UK is getting better. I think there is it's very interesting actually this conversation because it's gonna lead to the mindset element, which is very important to the performance, right?
Yes.
And what I notice, Izabela, is in the UK there is this mindset that, hey, no matter what is happening in the world, we're gonna move forward. We're gonna do it. We don't care. We need to move forward. We need to go back to business. We need to increase our investment. We need to. I'm not saying let's cover our eyes and let's forget what's going on, but that's the mentality of doing no matter what. Here in the in South Europe, as you probably know, based also your background, your story, etc., it's not really that. As soon as we see something is not really working as expected and the economy goes down, maybe there are less job opportunities in the market, people change their approach. They're more conservative to some extent, right? And when you are more conservative as a leader, it's really, really challenging because the real leaders, the visionary, they're not really conservative, right? They're actually doing things, they're building, they're thinking about the future. And when the situation is positive, there's a good mood around, energy, you are much more inclined to make bold decisions, taking some calculated risk for improving situation. But when there is a contraction in the market, unfortunately, the risk is you're gonna step back, right? So it's very interesting to see the difference, how we approach and how we deal with uncertainty.
I love that even the ones that are go-getters and visionaries you mentioned and very progressive in their approaches, everybody were kind of put a little bit for a second on standstill, right? And then it's like,
right.
How can you be visionary in times of the biggest crisis of your lifetime? And how can you be also, of course, everything bad passes, but you don't know what level of risks and damage and what you're going to have on the other end, right? And more than ever, we have pressure to make a better decisions, to be phenomenal decision makers, and also to influence others to do the same, to swim in unknown. And one of the things that, as you touched just a tad bit there about its performance, here in US, for example, we have such a low engagement, a low performance that is absolutely not surprising. We had that issue for so long before COVID, but then that really opened up even more so how low it is and how is that now affecting times during the crisis. So do you mind sharing a little bit about some factors and things you see that is happening as a result in Europe? Why is that? And then what do you think on the global scale?
Well, it's such a big topic, isn't it? So that's one of the one of the 1 million questions. And it's very interesting because there are different angles. So one thing that we know is, Gallup has been, of course, everyone knows about Gallup research in terms of low engagement, and that is unfortunately a very steady number, right? So always below the 20%, 15, 60%. I think what happened here is the fact that COVID has forced people to change their behaviors when it comes to work, and so keep performing as expected, but in a very completely different scenario, context, the working from home, etc. It's very interesting. What I notice here is at the beginning has been super challenging for people that are not used to work from home, for example, and dealing in a very different situation, right? But because we are creature of habits, what happened, and I think we coach people on these things, Izabela, both of us, is we know that behaviors takes time to change, but because we are creature of habits, once we understand how to get most of our time, our productivity, then we are forced to change our behaviors. So it took probably 3-6 months for each of employees, people to deal with this new thing. And you guess what? Now organizations say, come back to the office, like this. And people say, oh, hold on a second, I learned how to increase my level of performance working from home. Now you're not giving me any more that flexibility to leverage that and to get the most out of that. So I think there is a component of the relation between the behaviors changes, which is super important these days, and the context or environment where we're working. So that's one element. And the other thing to me very interesting is, unfortunately, the level of performance has decreased anyway, regardless of the good behaviors that we learn as an individuals, because the organizations haven't been able to increase the motivation in their employees and their people. Because when you work from home in a very different, so the situation is really very bad on the outside, but on the inside, we learn how to be more productive. But the reality, many leaders, they completely disregarded how you can be more performant when you are working remotely, so on distance. So they essentially ask to have more meetings, longer meetings, long in working hours, worse working conditions. So burnout, stress, depression, mental health is crazy. Unfortunately, what is going on right now in the business world. I wrote an article a few days ago about that. It's incredible how the wellness of employees, of people, has decreased working from home. So people that might think, working from home is nice, is beautiful, is great. It's not, because they're working long hours that bring more chronic stress, and chronic stress bring more anxiety, and then leads to worse performance because you feel in a worse. So I'm going to stop here, but there are two elements. So essentially is the behavioral changes related to the new context, but also how to increase performance. It's a new word, and unfortunately it's not working a lot because their leaders are not really helping people to improve the performance. That's how I say it. I don't know what you think about that.
I love it. And I love how you look at this holistically from 360 degrees. And you spot on that leaders are having a hard time also adopting. And right now, more than ever, pressure is for that growth, right? To sustain organization. A lot of competing high priorities and a lot of challenging decisions, because everything has a trade-off. And even if you have the best intent, you truly don't know how it's going to play out and what's going to happen.
Exactly.
But for me, I always think about human flourishing, right? We're the term of flourishing, to flourish as individually, or as individual contributor, then as a team, and then overall as organization. And what I really see is right now, if leaders are smart and really daring, they will have exponential growth, and even during the challenging times, if they're investing in human flourishing. If they're not doing that and they're just being sidetracked and backed down for metrics, cultures, and all the bottom line craziness that we see in the United States that completely alienated so many people, we're seeing a huge surge of mental health issues. We're seeing huge surge of complexity. And I love what you mentioned earlier, how much now by forcing or asking people to come back, so many of them are adopted not only to perform better or save the time, but adopted in that new normal, that also you have to allow a certain transition, right? You cannot just do things abruptly. And reality is the performance going to be better in offices, or offices that don't have necessarily good culture, good working environment, that are struggling?
Exactly right. Because look, and that's back to the point I was making in terms of chronic stress. So the chronic stress now has been proven that is actually also very much related to toxic cultures in organizations. So the toxic culture, it doesn't matter whether you're working from home or you're working in a team, the toxic culture, unfortunately, is going to be there. So, the starting point is actually the culture, because the culture is going to make a complete difference on the performance of individuals. I don't think many leaders, they really get this, because culture say, oh, we have been doing this since the day one, why we have to change it. So now that we know that there is a clear correlation between the culture and the stress, so essentially is performance, now we know that the culture is the number one thing that has to be changed in order to actually really make a game change in your business, grow again, thrive, increase your employees' engagement, increase the motivation, bring energy. So there are so many fantastic outcomes of redesigning the company culture. So most of my work, as probably you do as well, is around culture. So is building high-performing culture, starting from how I call it just the average culture. Because many organizations have average culture.
Yes,
but very few have
or below average right now, actually, based
or even below that, or even
yes.
below that.
Yes. And I love that you're finding that all of this is attached to the culture, and because the culture is being also diminished for many organizations, because people that used to be there, they're no longer with the company, right? So many positions were eliminated, and the culture got affected, because that shows the true color, right? Not when it's all great and dandy, as we'll say here in the United States, but when it's really hard and challenging. So with that in mind, I love, because I always look at from cultural standpoint things too. What's some of the things you're seeing happening right now in Europe, where you either see the culture being preserved because what they did for extra effort, or being damaged because they neglected to do? Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Well, I think so I'm a big fan of one single element that makes cultures extremely good for performance, which essentially trust is living. And that is super important nowadays with all conversation about workplace, working from home, coming back. Is all about trust, Izabela. That's how I say it. So trust is a number one factor that leads better performance in organizations. Now the question is, many organizations, many leaders now they finally show their face to the organization, right? Because what is happening is essentially if you don't trust your employees to work from home in a good way, essentially is you're showing that trust is not in place. And now is the time to show that you really trust your people. Because if you are, and I've seen this so many times, organizations say, hey guys, you know what, let's come back to the office. But then when you go a little bit deeper, you realize that the real reason why they want everyone coming back to the office is because they don't trust their people. It's that it. But they don't want to admit it, unfortunately, right?
Yes. You are spot on. I remember even some companies, big companies, that did not embrace blended work type between office and home, and that old way of thinking. And I really feel like that taps of leadership. It's not leadership; it's a micromanagement and management mentality.
Exactly.
Because by having people in the room, that doesn't mean they're going to perform. Just because they're breathing and taking space and taking overhead, that doesn't mean that they're going to be fully present, fully engaged, and then also as a result fully performing. And even the fact that we have specifically this huge issues in the United States, specifically in some parts of North America and Canada as well, we're seeing where people are having this really artificial team dynamics and positions, the titles, and who is engaged and how, and that you have actual employees being more competent, not only in leadership, but in their role. And it's very hard for a lot of them. And one of the main reasons why we see a lot of exodus, the way they're treated, as a lack of trust and a lack of space to give them open range so that they can be high performers, right? And in the same time also to not only trust them, but in the same time to give them the opportunities why they came in the first place in organization.
100%. And you brought this very interesting point about give them space. So when it comes to giving space, there are a couple of things in my mind. So one is giving psychological safety to speak up, to talk, to share what they're thinking. So essentially is let them empower them really to develop as individuals, but giving that safety. And the other element, which is equally important, actually is a level of autonomy. Because when there is no autonomy, and that's when micromanaging comes to play, right? So low level autonomy has been again proven from a neuroscientific perspective is actually one of the major factors of motivation. So when the level of autonomy is very low, the level of motivation in people goes down too. So you see, everything is connected, but really is autonomy. Autonomy is by far one of the probably three major success factors when it comes to engagement and motivating people. So, when I hear, we're still on a 15, back to the point that we were saying a little bit earlier, 15, 60% of engagement across the globe in terms of employees. Well, the first question to ask is, are you really giving them, first of all, autonomy to do things as they want? And most of the time the answer is no. So that's one of the main reasons why engagement and motivation is not there. So it's very, very interesting point, actually.
Yes, and it's so interesting how everything connects, isn't it? Because if you bring, like, I remember organizations fight so hard to bring all-star player under a team, either in the sports or business. And then when they're there, then they're put in the mold and very artificial environment where they're suffocating and not really thriving. And all of a sudden they're like blamed now on the performer because, it's like you're not delivering what we're expecting. But then in reality is, look at the environment you put that. It's like you transplanted this beautiful tree that was flourishing and bearing the fruit every year. And you brought it in this environment that actually barely can survive and it's dying. So why? What's wrong? Because that person already know how to be high performer, already know what he needs to or she needs to do. But now at that environment, the climate, it's not allowing that. And a lot of times it's such an easy, quick thing. And specifically when you have cultures and environments where they're focusing on short-term goals versus long-term goals and objectives.
Absolutely. And you're totally right. I love that, is the short term. But here's my challenge. I always challenge everyone when it comes to culture and long-term and short terms in this way. Many leaders, many CEOs in particular, the average tenure of a CEOs, it's probably around 3-4 years ish, right? I think it's a good number. So 3-4 years. Now we know that changing a company culture, so it takes time, right? Because if it's a small organization, it's easier. But if it's a just medium, large size organization, to go, layer by layer, and it takes time. The question is, for a CEO, is it good risk to take changing the culture, knowing that maybe after 3 years they're gonna move somewhere else, or not? And I think the quality leaders, they're going to change the culture no matter when I'm going to stay just 3 years. They know they're going to build, your show is called Legacy Leader, right? So there you go. They know they need to build a legacy no matter where they're going to stay or not in the organization. They know that if they allow the organization to flourish, win, changing the culture, becoming a high-performing culture, they will flourish too, because that's about legacy. But many leaders are much more conservative, scared, and they might say, culture is the worst. It's too difficult project. It's better I'm gonna stay there, not taking risks, maybe increasing 5% revenues, making sure the shareholders are happy, not making any mistake. Unfortunately, that's his approach. But in my experience, Izabela, culture is something that is a changing a culture is decision that has to be made as soon as you realize that your performance are not good as an organization. And then you need to understand why the performance is not good. But most of the time, there is something about the culture that is preventing organization from really thriving. That's my experience.
That is brilliant. And I love that you touched on, which we're going to segue a little bit more, because we were talking here also Fortune 500 companies, right? How many of them are changing, not only the ranking where they're at due to lack of change and non-willingness to transform, because even though some of them are established hundreds of years ago, for example, and what they used to be and who they are, you don't change the history, you don't change the logo, you don't change the brand, maybe you don't change the value, but certain things that were done before you are now a multinational large corporation that our whole world recognize, you have stakeholders, not just those external ones, right? And then be in the driver's seat and drive it to the next level. So I'm curious, from dynamics of leaders and executives, what do you see right now? Some of their either pain points or some of the things that they're really doing extremely well that others should do. Because yes, more and more people are talking about legacy, which is ironic. Not only the Legacy Leaders Show, but they're recognizing that what they're doing, how strong and rippling effect and implications that have on generations to come. I mean, think about it. Every employee you have in your organization, their families is affected, their children are affected. They will remember and will know who they will like or trust, or who they will support, and who will advocate for based on their parents' experience. And where they're going to go, where their loyalty will be, either as a consumer or as a potential future worker, whatever might be the case, right? So now when we have such a global, I wouldn't say competition, but open floodgates where we can really pick and find that high performing talent from all over the world, I'm curious, what do you see coming? What do you see where the future is headed from that standpoint?
Well, I think one thing is certainly, and again, is about trust. Is building this mindset of, you as a leader, you have to really instill trust in organizations. That's number one. So for me, it's really one thing that is going to be a game changer for leaders. The other thing is also about their personal leadership as well. So in other words, I still see too many very egocentric leaders. And ego, and ego is, again, is proven to be one of the major risks for leaders, because unfortunately, as soon as they become, top executive CEOs, the first thing that's going to happen, they're going to develop testosterone. And the testosterone essentially is going to really help them to see themselves in front of a mirror, like, oh gosh, I'm the king here, so I can do whatever I want. So, and that is really leading leaders, bad leaders, unfortunately, to make very bad choices in the organization. So ego, I think the future leader is really about leaders that they leave the ego at the door. And that is going to be a game changer for many leaders. So the best leaders are those that they forget about the egos. To some extent, there has to be a portion there, but it has to be really a different way to say it. And, I do a lot of work with technology firms, and technology leaders, unfortunately, some of them, they're really super egocentric. And I think there's been such a bad story because, the very high level of egocentrism essentially is going to lead to a very bad culture anyway. So everything is connected, but really ego is a trust, more trust, less ego. And clearly in my experience is more, again, to the point of autonomy, is really let your people design your organization. So don't give rigid structure and system in your organization, but let them really build the organization, because that is going to be the best way to motivate them. So give them really the keys of your, of your car, of your house. Hey, that's the key. That's the purpose. That's what we're going to lead. Now, guys, it's up to you going there and just really empowering this situation on happening. That's my point. That's my view, I think.
I love that. And thank you for giving the real clear snapshot of what is happening right now. And one thing I would just add is also a lack of competency. You can't lead in current times if you don't continue building yourself, right?
Totally, great point.
Learning and growing. And I see this, in addition to ego, that arrogance that I know all, right? Or I'm good where I'm at, or whatever. It's definitely also bleeding through, because shows the lack of competency, shows the lack of confidence, actually, because every time you have to insert the ego, something else is lacking, right? And very often what I'm finding actually lack the confidence. The confidence is missing. 100%. We have a healthy confidence, we have an artificial confidence, we have a macho confidence, but what we're talking about is that true, genuine confidence in who we are individually, how do we show up, and then how do we serve, how do we interact with others. And if that is not there, all of that is masking, and it's just, as you said, damaging the culture and creating too many problems. So with
Love
that,
that.
go ahead.
No, just one is fantastic what you just shared. It actually, there is, I think it was a tweet from me weeks ago. There's a kind of a good success. And essentially what I said is asking help to your people is not a sign of weaknesses. That's what we need to understand. Leaders can ask help, can ask support without jeopardize or compromise the level of confidence in the organization. Because unfortunately, that's just one of the limiting beliefs. I'm not going to say I'm wrong. I'm not going to say sorry. I'm not going to ask for advice, because otherwise I'm going to undermine my level of confidence and my status in organization. That has to be changed. Has to be changed, because confidence is not measured in these things. Confidence measuring something else. So I'm so glad actually you brought this up.
Yes. Thank you. Welcome. And I'm glad that you are going deeper so that everybody that is watching and listening can really understand if they're in that position. And I love what you said. You established yourself. You led a lot of large teams. You were in such a high profile roles in the past. And then you realize how you can serve the leadership team and became this enterprise where you can truly help them to hone their skill sets, to master, to be effective, right? But
Yes.
with that in mind, obviously, everything you've been from traveling the world and everything else, I'm sure it's also one deeper desire for you to be fulfilled, right? And then see what is possible. So do you mind sharing a little bit about that journey and impact and desire? Because you already have a great legacy carved it for yourself. But what would you like to be known for, and where would you like to land in terms of that tremendous success?
That's such a great question, Izabela. Thank you for asking. I think for me, it's very simple, because I've been in very challenging roles for most of my corporate career. I mean, I lived in Africa, West Africa, Middle East, many other ways, in situations not certainly comfortable, right? So I learned how to stretch myself out of my comfort zone and be comfortable actually in uncomfortable. And that led me to get better, improving. So not being complacent with average, right? And that's what I learned, but I've seen so many people, they're just settled. They're just settled. They say, you know what, that's the maximum I can do. Well, that is good enough. It's not good enough. It could be much better. So my mission, if you like, Izabela, is very simple. I'm here to fight mediocrity. For me, mediocrity doesn't sit on the table. So when I see mediocrity in organization, I feel I have to do something. That's the reason why I do what I do right now. So I've been working with the CEOs, executives, and potentially really to go to the maximum level of performance, because that is how unlocking our human potential, because we are not designed for average. We are designed for optimal performance. But unfortunately, we settle. And I hate when I see people settling. And that's my purpose. That's my mission. That's the reason why I do what I do.
Wow, that is such a powerful, and I love that, because all of us have a potential, right? Question is, are we desiring to tap into that or not? And then when you
Exactly.
just said it's a great legacy and it's a great thing to be known for, but I'm also brought up something that I'm sure you can share a little bit more from that experience. Like, took me so long when I see people's potential, specifically what you said, being uncomfortable, being in different parts of the world, different infrastructures, different cultures, languages, how you put yourself to be uncomfortably comfortable. It's a part of the growth. And I'm sure that it was the most exponential growth, but how many people will stay in their comfort zone, right? And how many people actually welcome status quo because they don't need to do more, or they don't need to do anything extra, and they can just do it on autopilot. And I remember one of my first mistakes in executive coaching training and just in general working with executives. It's like, I'm seeing so much tremendous potential here, but if they're not willing to tap into it, doesn't matter how close to that they are. And took me a while to really figure out to meet them where they're at. So do you mind sharing some of your journeys and experiences that will kind of really help executives that are watching and listening to this show?
Yeah, so it's such a great point. It's learning to be comfortable again in uncomfortable, it requires gut, it requires courage, it requires vulnerability. And this is why people, they don't want to do it. I do work with people, they have a very low level of confidence and they are scared about jumping into the unknown. And it's very difficult, as I'm sure that is the same experience that you have, Izabela, as a coach. It's very difficult to, no, I'm not saying convincing, but to help people to move outside their comfort zone, because it's risky, it's bad, you're gonna get hurt, there is a risk of failure, and you don't want to show to people that you're failing. So there are a lot of good reasons to not do it. But also, we know that what brought us, up to the point where we are is not going to be enough for something else we want to do in our life. We know that, back in our mind, we know it, but we don't want to admit it. So that's much easier than, let's sit on the couch, and because we will never be there, because we are limiting ourselves, right? Yeah. But my strategy, simply is this. The only way to be comfortable and uncomfortable is just taking every single day one single step. It doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be big. It doesn't need to be huge, but into the uncomfort. The only way to grow is every single day, just one step into the uncomfort, and stay there for a bit. I always say it's like dancing in a moment, dancing in and out until you feel good enough to stay in the new position. And once you're there, it's a time to build the next step for the next round. That is the way how you build it. There is no way. There are no books. There are no training courses. There are no programs. Nothing can really help you to step out of your comfort zone if you're not willing to take it every single day, that small step, right? James Clear has written an amazing book, called Atomic Habits, and most of us know and read that book. And he says something very, very simple, but it's such an important thing. He says, you just need to take 1% improvement every single day in order to make yourself better. 1%. So, and you can apply this to many different things in your world, right? In your life. So what is the 1% that you have to do today that's going to make you just a little bit uncomfortable? So then you can really learn how to be comfortable when the situation happens. And that has been my life, Izabela. I've been in an uncomfortable zone for 20 years. As soon as I did my university, I went to a remote island in the middle of nowhere in West Africa, where there was just a bush. There was some interesting government there, and because I'm coming from the oil energy, so there was an oil gas field in the middle of the ocean, and that's why I was there. I could have stayed here in my own country, in Italy. I could have stayed with my friends. I could have worked in a bank. I could have, so many easier things were available to me. But I decided to step into that comfort every single day. And probably what I learned here, I don't know what is your experience, what is the outcome of your experience, Izabela, but for me, I think I learned 10 times more than my friends, because now I see again my friends, for example, and we are different. We're different because it's not only based on the experience that we've been through, but also you understand that you can do something more than what they can do, because they never really wanted to challenge themselves. And I'm not blaming them. It's just a matter of deciding, what kind of life you want to live. And the same applies to business.
Comfort zone or risk zone. And it's sad when we outgrow people that we love. I love that you mentioned that, because it's the same story for me too. And when you go and circle back and nothing wrong, and it's like that lifestyle works for them, but then they confirmed, they accepted. And I even remember somebody was just talking, is like, Izabela, I can't believe you are not aging, you look so great, comparing, when they were putting them. It's like, but because I love what I do, and sometimes it's not always, as you said, financially necessarily rewarding, or maybe rewarding with the comfort of family or friends, but is rewarding in exponential growth and putting yourself out there, and that level of vulnerability that so many people will never dare to go.
No, also because you're going to feel lonely, right? You're going to feel lonely in that journey because you don't have necessarily a support system in place during the journey when you are really stepping into the uncomfort. At least that was for me. I've been lonely. When I say lonely, it's not necessarily the fact that there was no someone around you, but the fact that you're living the uncomfortable experience at the end of the day as an individual, no matter who is around you, but it's your choice that you are making. And yeah, I love talking about this because it's such an important thing, but there is no way to get better until you do it, unfortunately.
Exactly. And nobody can do the work because right now working more into advisory roles and advising organizations and companies. And then obviously comes that coaching and consulting as additional layer. But it's like you can have as many advisors, you can throw as many people, unless you do actual work and you're willing to make it happen. uh, they cannot, they can advise you, give you some possible, quicker, better ways. But ultimately, if they are not doing the work, we cannot be doing work for them, and people don't realize that. So I love your sharing today. It's very impactful, and I hope that all of our audience listening and watching, it's getting a lot of value. And Andrea, if you don't mind, in the closing, just to reflect for the moment, some of the really actionable things that we're seeing right now, right? Not only just for executives and people in high power positions, but everyone else that wanted to elevate their game, their performance, and of course, influence and impact. What would you recommend for them?
Well, there are many things, but most of the things that we have shared so far, I think they're already great insights. I think another thing that for me is important, you think about performance from, it's a couple of things. One is the drive. You have to have that drive, that sense of, it's a combination of urgency, purpose, curiosity, passion. So there is one element which is actually a combination of that. You have to have these things in place. If you don't, there's no way to increase your level of performance, because there will be always a reason of going down your level of performance, because, oh, I'm not motivated enough, or I don't have an energy today, or, well, I'm not passionate what I'm doing. So everything, unfortunately, has to be in place. Purpose, passion, drives. This is super important, one thing. The second thing, that also from my personal experience, don't think about performance only from a pure business standpoint, performance in the meeting, in the email, in the contract, in the call, etc. Performance, it has to be at 360 degrees. You have to be at the best of yourself in order to get the best of your performance as well. So, and for many years, Izabela, I underestimated the importance of that. I said, well, let's work hard, let's work more, let's keep doing, don't stop. That's the way to increase the performance. It's not doing less, but doing better, and be perfect. And when I say be perfect, say your mindset has to be perfectly ready to the challenge. Your body has to be perfectly ready for that. So it's not only about the work, but it's how your mind and your body are ready to step up your level of performance.
Wow, that is amazing. And I love what you just shared, and everybody that are seeking what they can do. There we have it. If you just depict this last few minutes of this conversation, you have the winning formula. And I love how simple truth is, isn't it? We always seek things in complexities, but reality, the more simplified lifestyle, simplified processes, but also simplified knowledge, information, that is where the secret sauce always is. So, with that in mind, do you mind just sharing also with us what is happening in your bucket list now that hopefully we can soon be able to travel again? And obviously, being so involved in gas and oil and technology industry and whatnot, what is on your bucket list, or where the next trip is coming?
Wow, what a question. Well, it's funny enough, most of my clients are in the US, although I have clients in the UK, in Italy, in Europe, and in Dubai, actually. But I have clients in the US, and US for me is an interesting market because One is the industry, because I do a lot of work in the energy space, technology, and US as something very interesting for me, especially in the Texas area, as you can imagine. Although technology is a great space as well in London, the UK, all the startup environment. But, the Brexit is also affecting some dynamics here. So many organizations, actually, they are moving back either to US or moving maybe to the European community, European Union, for better transaction. So I think the US is super important, but also the Middle East, because Middle East is a place that I love as well. I've been there, and I've been speaking. And so one of my probably next 12 months, my main interest will be going back and speaking more at events. So US and the Middle East probably are the major areas for my next trips, as long as we can do it. And what about you? What is your next one?
That is really interesting. For me, is obviously Europe and then Middle East, and I love what
there you
just
go.
mentioned. Yeah. But of course, in US, playing in I feel like in this big pond is definitely there. We do all the states that we have and different dynamics, and you spot on. A lot of companies are truly trying to reorganize because they're also being very affected with everything else. No industry can say that they did not get affected, and some more than the others, and definitely gas and oil industry it's being severely affected. So they're regrouping, restructuring, and a plethora of opportunities there. But that's amazing. But for me, for pleasure, I really crave to go to some of those islands like Bora Bora or San Martin or Croatia, where I can do beautiful sailing, because now you really start appreciating, the beauty. If you didn't, I mean, I always appreciate it, but for me, it's more than ever being 100% present. And when you do the work, you do the work, but when you really enjoy it, then just to enjoy it. And I have to say, I've craved great food. I crave visiting Italy and Croatia. So that is in the high on my list, and trying some really great foods and just enjoying the beautiful arts and culture, and as a result, also people.
I tell you what, it's such a great point, because, I always want to go to very exotic places like islands in the middle of nowhere. But then you think about it, say, hey, but you in Croatia, me in Italy, we live, or we used to live, or we're parents and family, whatever, in these such amazing countries. And my wife always said, but why are you always looking for something so drastic, exotic, when we have, you're coming, my wife is not Italian, so she's from another country. Say, yes, you have everything there. Why are you always looking for something different? Which is fun, which is fascinating. We're always looking for something different, when sometimes we have the beauty at home where we don't realize that.
Yeah, because I feel like we have a natural desire to explore, right?
Yes,
and embrace other cultures.
Right.
And I also think that is the key to success of companies and key to success of individuals. The more we attach, more we explore, we more know, we better serve. So thank you so much, Andrea, for being here with us today and sharing on the Legacy Leader Show, giving us your tremendous perspective. And we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road and seeing where things are. And opportunities endless, aren't they?
Absolutely right. It's been amazing talking to you every single time. The level of conversation is always very high, and that really gets me excited. Thank you so much for inviting me to your show.
Thank you for listening to Legacy Leader Show. If you enjoyed the content and had a positive experience, then please leave us a positive rating. In addition, leave us a positive review whenever you are listening on whatever platform there might be. Make sure your friends and family also know about the benefit and value that we provide and what we have to offer. Cheers.